stay away from the area reserved for very important guests. You are only a temporary employee. The lobby manager tore the temporary badge from Claire Lawson's uniform and pushed her back from the velvet barrier. Less than 1 minute later, the woman he had driven away would be the only person who recognized that a little girl was in danger. Rain struck the windows of the Reed Grand Hotel, where preparations were underway for a fundraising event benefiting Cascadia Children's Hospital. Claire's worn uniform made her look out of place among the evening gowns and gold name tags. "I was only bringing water to the technical crew," she explained. "Use the employee entrance. Do not let the guests think you belong in this picture." Claire turned away. Her wages that evening would cover part of her mother's medication bill. She could not afford to walk away because of one humiliating remark. At that moment, widowed billionaire Alexander Reed entered with his 7-year-old daughter, Sophie. Camera flashes exploded around them. Sophie clutched a blue, star-shaped audio story player, slipped away from her caregiver, and ran toward the glass revolving door. She became trapped in the flow of guests and did not hear her father calling. Claire dropped the drink tray and pushed through the barrier before security could stop her. "Sophie, I am not going to touch you." Claire knelt several steps away. "Look at the paper star on the door. It is still in the same place. Can you see it?" Sophie raised her head and fixed her eyes on the silver star swinging above the entrance. "1 count breathing in, 2 counts breathing out. Very good. Now take 1 step backward toward me." Claire maintained her distance and guided Sophie out 1 step at a time. When the camera flashes erupted again, she removed her inexpensive coat and covered the girl's head and shoulders. Alexander reached them just as Sophie took Claire's hand. The 3 of them stood beneath the same umbrella. A camera shutter clicked. Victoria Hale appeared almost immediately. "Remove that woman," the public relations director ordered. She approached Mr. Reed's daughter without permission while cameras were present. "We do not know what she wants." Claire looked at Alexander. His face was still pale with fear, but his first words were, "Run a background check on her." Security escorted Claire through the lobby beneath suspicious stares. She did not defend herself. She only looked back and said, "Sophie is still gripping her left hand too tightly. Take her somewhere quiet and do not force her to answer questions." Dr. Maya Chen examined Sophie and spoke directly to Alexander. Claire handled the situation correctly. If she had tried to pull or hug Sophie, the panic could have become worse. Alexander found Claire in the employee hallway. "I apologize for how you were treated. The company will pay for your shift and replace your coat." Claire stood. "You do not need to pay for the coat. You need to make sure people stop taking pictures next time before your daughter feels forced to run." He said nothing. After Claire left, Alexander returned and positioned himself between Sophie and the cameras. Across the lobby, Victoria looked at her phone. For a moment, the initials PH appeared on the internal schedule beside a time the following morning. The next day, Claire awoke to dozens of calls. The photograph beneath the umbrella had spread across social media under the headline, "Has Alexander Reed's secret wife appeared?" Claire looked as though she were embracing a family she did not belong to. Donations to the hospital increased dramatically. Victoria invited Claire back to the Reed Grand. A nearly completed contract was already waiting on the table, even though the meeting had only just been arranged. 3 days, Victoria said. You appear beside Mr. Reed at several private events. The payment will cover most of your mother's medical debt. Claire looked at the amount, and her palms became cold. Victoria even knew about a debt Claire had never mentioned. I will not sell a child's panic. Eleanor Reed placed the contract on the table. And my granddaughter will not become a prop for a corporate merger. Victoria simply pushed the donation report toward them. If we deny the story now, the press will investigate Sophie's condition. We only need a few discreet appearances. Claire started to stand, but then she noticed the proposal describing therapy rooms for children who had lost their parents. She remembered the nights her mother had spent in intensive care and the unpaid debt waiting in the small kitchen where they still counted every bill. Then she said, I have 3 conditions. Sophie will not answer questions from the press. No one will arrange for her to touch or embrace me. And I may end the agreement immediately if I believe Sophie is being harmed. Eleanor read the contract carefully and demanded that all 3 conditions be added. Alexander signed last. Victoria closed the folder, but Claire had already noticed that a photography schedule had been created before she signed anything. That evening, at the Reed estate, Claire did not enter Sophie's bedroom. She lowered herself to the girl's eye level and asked, Would you like me inside the room or outside in the hallway? Sophie pointed toward the hallway and pressed the star-shaped story player against her chest. Claire sat on the floor outside the door and slowly read a story about a small bird finding its way through the darkness. When she reached the final page, she unconsciously used a familiar closing line. The brave little star can always find its way home. A soft sound came from behind the door. Sophie stepped into the hallway, placed a paper star in Claire's hand, and looked at her with an expression that was both astonished and certain. You are the storyteller of the stars. Claire froze. She had never met Sophie before that rainy afternoon. So why did the girl recognize a voice that even Alexander had never heard? Claire was still looking at Sophie when Dr. Maya approached. Her eyes moved from the paper star to the blue story player the girl was holding. That sentence you just used, Maya said quietly. Where do you usually say it? Claire explained Starlight Voices, a program that recorded bedtime stories for children receiving treatment. She read under the name Miss C, but she was never told who listened to the recordings. With Sophie's permission, Maya examined the device. SR7, she said. Sophie has listened to your voice every night for 6 months. Those recordings helped her sleep without keeping the lights on all night. Alexander froze. He lived in the same house as his daughter, yet he had never heard the voice that helped her survive her darkest nights. Looking at Sophie, he realized that a stranger's voice had been beside his child when he had not. Claire knelt. I am very happy the story stayed with you, but I am Claire. I am not your mother, and we will not pretend otherwise. Sophie did not answer. She only placed the paper star in Claire's hand. Maya nodded. Claire had not used the child's attachment as an opportunity to move deeper into the Reed family. The following morning, Maya invited Alexander to attend a therapy session. Sophie drew a house beneath 3 stars but left 1 doorway empty. Alexander began to ask why, but Claire gently shook her head. Ask her what the picture wants to tell you. Alexander lowered his chair to his daughter's eye level. Who are the 3 stars? Sophie touched them one at a time. Mother, Dad, me. And the empty doorway? The person who will always come back. The answer made Alexander lower his eyes. After the session, he admitted that Rachel had died while he was in New York handling a company crisis. Every time he looked at Sophie, he remembered that he had been absent when his family needed him most. He had handed his daughter over to caregivers and specialists because he feared that his presence might cause her more pain. "Guilt cannot raise a child," Claire said. "Sophie needs her father to be present even when he does not know what to say." The next morning, Alexander made pancakes himself. The first batch burned completely, and the smoke alarm began ringing. As he struggled to wave the smoke away, Sophie gave a soft laugh. Alexander became still, as though he had just heard a sound that had been missing for 2 years. For the first time, that step forward had come from her father. The moment had barely ended when 2 equipment vehicles stopped outside the estate. Victoria entered with a photography crew. "It is only a natural family morning," she said. Claire examined the instructions. Sophie would sit in the middle. Claire would place a hand on the girl's shoulder. Alexander would look at them affectionately. Every movement had already been written. "No photographs of Sophie," Claire said. "This violates the agreement." Eleanor stood beside her. "Pack the equipment, Victoria." Victoria smiled and ordered the session canceled. But as she walked away, she opened the schedule for that evening's gala and moved the press area into the hallway Sophie would have to use. Later that afternoon, at the Reed Grand, a silver flash drive engraved with a small house fell from Victoria's files. Claire bent down to pick it up. On a nearby screen were the words, "Project Hearth, Phase 3, Emotional Confirmation." Victoria grabbed the drive. "It is only the internal name of the campaign." "Then why was the photography schedule created before I signed the agreement?" "Public relations professionals prepare for every possibility," Victoria said, closing the computer. "You only need to perform your role." Maya sent a written warning that Sophie was not ready to face a crowd or camera flashes. Victoria removed that section from the schedule sent to Alexander. She kept only the sentence saying Sophie could attend for a limited period. At the gala, Claire noticed that twice as many cameras had been placed near Sophie's path as the agreement allowed. She demanded that the girl be taken to a private room, but Victoria blocked her. "Alexander is about to speak. We only need a few more minutes." The lights suddenly went out. A large screen began showing private footage of Rachel. Victoria had added it to the program without warning anyone. When her mother's face appeared, Sophie became completely still. Applause filled the room, and camera flashes exploded from the hallway that had been deliberately opened. Alexander was standing on stage, separated from his daughter by the crowd. Claire immediately left her assigned position, knelt, and shielded Sophie from the cameras. "Look at me. Find one thing that is still exactly where it belongs. The brave little star can always find its way home." Sophie began trembling, then wrapped her arms tightly around Claire as though holding the final safe point in the room. "Mom, please do not leave me." The entire ballroom became silent. Claire did not push the girl away, but she also did not accept the name Sophie had called her. She held Sophie only firmly enough to help her breathe again. "Your mother will always be your mother. I cannot replace her. But right now, I will not leave you alone." Alexander left the stage. He ordered every camera switched off, then carried Sophie out himself. The girl continued holding Claire's hand, then reached with her other hand until she found her father's. For the first time, Alexander publicly placed his daughter above the company's program. Inside the private lounge, Victoria approached with excitement in her eyes as notifications continued appearing on her phone. "That video could save the entire campaign." Claire removed her guest badge and placed it on the table. The agreement ends now. She turned and walked away. Alexander was passing the control room when he heard Victoria speaking to an associate behind a door that had not completely closed. "The girl just gave us exactly the headline I promised North Star." Alexander stopped. If Sophie's panic had not been an accident, how long had Victoria been planning this performance? Alexander pushed open the control room door. "What did you promise North Star?" Victoria did not deny anything. She said the campaign had raised millions of dollars and that the merger would protect thousands of jobs. "Introduce Claire as your fiancée and describe Sophie's reaction as a healing moment. We can still save tonight." Through the glass, Alexander saw his daughter pressed close to Claire. For 2 years, he had entrusted Sophie to other people. Now he had allowed someone else to decide how his daughter's pain would be presented. "No," he said. "The performance ends here." Claire was preparing to leave the hotel. She did not demand more money or threaten to speak to the press. "I only want every image of Sophie removed." Eleanor entered with Jordan Ellis, the compliance director. After noticing unusual expenses from the beginning, Eleanor had requested that campaign emails and data be preserved. Jordan documented the situation and sealed a copy of the house-shaped flash drive. "No one has been found guilty of anything," he said. "But the data will not disappear." Alexander turned toward Claire. "Please return to the ballroom, not to pretend to be my wife. I need to correct the lie in front of the people who heard it." He stepped onto the stage while the live broadcast was still active. "Claire Lawson is not my wife or my fiancée," Alexander said. "She was hired to participate in a 3-day public image campaign. I signed the agreement, and I accept responsibility for allowing it to exist. My daughter never agreed to become part of that campaign." The cameras turned toward Claire. She did not reveal Sophie's therapy records. A frightened child may call someone by the name of the person who makes her feel safe. That moment is not an advertisement, and it does not belong to any business transaction. Dr. Maya confirmed that she had sent a written warning stating Sophie should not be exposed to crowds or camera flashes. She did not disclose any of the child's private medical information. Jordan presented the information that had been verified so far. The first photograph had been sent from a contact account belonging to the Public Relations Department. Project Hearth had been created 11 days before Claire signed the contract. It contained sections titled Mysterious Wife, Emotional Confirmation, and Merger Value. Dr. Maya's warning had been shortened before it was forwarded to Alexander. There was no evidence that Claire had leaked the photograph or sought public attention. Victoria stood motionless. Eleanor announced that the Reed Foundation Board had temporarily suspended her pending an independent investigation. "This is not a criminal judgment. It is a measure to preserve records and prevent the campaign from continuing." A North Star representative announced that the brand valuation process would be suspended until an ethical audit was complete. In front of hundreds of donors, the image Victoria had created collapsed under the weight of her own data. Alexander did not use her as a scapegoat. "I noticed warning signs, but I did not ask questions because the financial results were too convenient." He announced that all images of Sophie would be removed. He would establish child privacy protections and an independent oversight board, use his executive bonus to replace any hospital donations lost because of the scandal, and provide long-term funding for Starlight Voices without using the names or images of the children who listened. After the gala, Alexander offered to pay Claire's medical debt in full. She shook her head. "I do not want kindness to become another debt." She accepted payment only for the portion of the contract she had completed. 3 months later, Claire returned to teaching full-time. Through an open selection process, she became a part-time advisor to the Reed Foundation's storytelling program. Her position did not depend on Alexander. The independent investigation confirmed that Victoria had leaked information, altered reports, and violated child protection policies. She was dismissed, and the records were transferred to attorneys and the proper authorities for review. No one declared her guilty before a formal judgment. Jordan was assigned to create an independent system for reporting misconduct. Eleanor formed a Child Privacy Protection Board, while Alexander accepted limits on part of his executive authority during the reforms. Dr. Maya continued Sophie's therapy. Alexander reduced his business travel, attended therapy with his daughter, and practiced reading stories to her. One evening, he finally listened to Rachel's final message from beginning to end. She did not blame him. She only asked him not to let work cause Sophie to grow up without knowing her father. 6 months later, Claire attended Sophie's art exhibition at the library. There was no contract, no camera crew, and no evening gown. Sophie called her Claire, exactly as they had agreed. In the new drawing, 3 stars still rested above the roof, but the doorway was no longer empty. Rachel had not been erased. Claire stood on the small garden path, walking toward the house rather than taking the place of Sophie's mother. Alexander and Claire were not married. They slowly learned about each other through coffee, walks, and activities with Sophie. No one made rushed promises. As Claire prepared to leave, Sophie asked, "Will you come back next Saturday?" Claire checked her calendar. "Yes, at 10 o'clock. If anything changes, I will tell you before then." Sophie did not call her mother. She smiled and gave Claire a new paper star. Written on it were the words, "The person who always tells the truth about when she will come back." Sophie no longer needed someone to pretend to be her mother. She had a father who was truly present, and a woman who cared enough not to promise more than she could keep. A family is not created by a perfect image displayed before a crowd. It is created by people who tell the truth, respect what has been lost, and return when they promised they would.